Hi, I'm Eric Lubau, and welcome to Beyond the Belt. This is a conversation with Matt McPeake, a black belt out of Ontario, Canada. Matt is an engineer and director of sales in the paper and packaging industry. Matt was also one of the first episodes that I recorded, and I hadn't quite figured out the themes correctly, so we ended up recording two separate sessions in order to showcase Matt the way that I wanted. I hope you enjoyed both parts of our chat. So tell me what it was like getting your black belt. What was that journey like?
I think, I've been involved with martial arts in my entire life. I think I was 8 years old when I started doing judo. So, I've been around different arts and, I've had black belts in other martial arts. And, it always seems to be a great achievement. I think with Jiujitsu, where it's different is it takes such a long time, right? It's not just a matter of learning a few techniques or, learning, katas and patterns and things like that. And, within 5 years you can get a black belt, or you're 12 years old and you're a third degree black belt in something, right? It takes a long time to do it. And in my journey, I think everyone that's sticks with it long enough to get a black belt, everyone has a unique story. There's always adversity in it. It might be injury, you might move from another gym. Life happens. For me, I was at a gym for it was about 14 years as a four stripe brown belt, and the culture got overly toxic and political, and I needed to, I pulled the plug, right? I said, I got to get out of here. I've been involved with BJJ Globetrotters since, 2015. So I'd been a few years in with them, and, follow Christian when he did his travel blog, read his book, and went, this is what I want to do. And I attended the very first USA camp in 2015 and really decided, like, this is what I want my journey to be. Open, have a home base that you can go and train, but be able to go out and explore and train and experience, different gyms, different jiu-jitsu cultures. But that was completely opposite of what my coach wanted. He wanted, the old school tribal, only train within these four walls. He had to be the sole source of jiu-jitsu. And almost
That's what
like
you meant by toxic? Like
toxic, yeah. Like, I mean, when you see those memes about, like, what's a jiu-jitsu cult, it was checking off every box, right? And a lot of people ask me, like, why did you stay so long? And I said, well, I had a little bit of leeway, right? Like, I was going outside, training when I traveled. I traveled quite a bit with work, so I had the opportunity to train at other gyms when I was traveling and see a different side of jiu-jitsu, learn some different techniques, bring it back. And as a brown belt, I was teaching quite a few classes. So it was a big decision for me to pull the plug and to leave. And I remember conversations that I had. That happened, I think, in the fall. I remember that summer I was at the USA camp in Maine, and I was talking with a few of the other black belts that were there, and they knew my story, right? Because I'd been around them already for a couple of years, and they kept asking, like, they kept going, like, when are you going to leave? Why are you staying there? Like, and finally something happened. I just said, I'm out of here. So I was kind of like, shit, what am I going to do now, right? I've been at this for 14 years, going almost 15 years, and I thought, okay, who knows? I might be another 3 years. I might be another 5 years. I don't know. I was really hesitant on going and joining another gym right away. I had a friend that lived maybe about a half an hour, 45 minutes away that, he was under the same association but didn't have the same mentality as my coach did. So I was going and training there just to still have a contact and training, and having access to another black belt. But, started training in my garage. A couple of guys that had also left, we got back together again. We threw mats in the basement and we were training. So I was just prepared to kind of do that for however long until I found the right club, the right culture, start training again. But unbeknownst to me, when I went back to the main camp in the summer of 2018, the Traveling Black Belt Council, which you've kind of seen that, you've been part of it. You know who the regular crew is, of the Globetrotter instructors. They didn't tell me that they were going to test me, right? And that's so I had no idea what was going on. So they all knew my story, and a couple of them got together and said, hey, let's help this guy out, right? I love rolling with everybody at camp, and but all the black belts were coming up and wanted to roll with me, and I thought this was great. They were smashing the shit out of me. I was learning a lot, and at the end of that camp, there's usually a few belt promotions that happen at those camps. People will come and say, hey, I don't have a regular coach. I think maybe I'm ready for my purple belt. And all the instructors will roll with you, and if they unanimously decide that, hey, yeah, this person deserves a purple belt, there'll be a promotion at the end of camp. So I guess they all agreed that I'd been at it long enough, they knew me long enough, and trusted me that at the end of that camp, I got awarded my black belt. So that was completely unexpected, and it was a super, as it should be an emotional day for you, but it was a super emotional day for me because I felt like a big weight had been lifted off my chest. The chains had been broken, and I at that point now I had my freedom. I had a black belt that had no strings attached, right? And I know a few guys that have, even at the club that I left, that got their black belt, they felt like there's an obligation because this guy gave me a belt, he gave me a black belt, whatever the belt was, I need to stay. And I'm like, no, that's not what it's about. And I remember, and the nice thing about doing those camps and meeting Globetrotters and traveling is you get to meet some really cool people. I remember talking to Chris Howder one time, and Chris Howder was kind of like, yeah, he goes, the black belt, that should be your freedom. Right, it shouldn't be used as a leash or control. It should be your freedom. And so that's what I really felt it was freedom. So it really set in my mind, my mentality of what I wanted jiu-jitsu to be. I wanted it to be open source, accessible to everyone. For me, it's, you're a black belt, yes, but that doesn't mean you're an expert in everything, right? I mean, I'm sure you've been into the gyms where, you go to the coach and you ask him about relationship advice, you ask him about financial advice, you ask him about this and that, and I think that's where it kind of gets a little bit weird that the black belt, your coach, they're the expert in jiu-jitsu. Go talk to them about jiu-jitsu. Now, if they happen to be a doctor or a lawyer or a financial person, you can talk to them about that, but sometimes taking that type of advice from a black belt may not be the best source of information.
That's great. My coach has this great story of he had a line of people early on in the pandemic who were asking him should I get vaccinated? And he's like, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm a jiu-jitsu coach. Stop asking me these questions.
Yeah, exactly. It was great for me. So my whole thing is to kind of try to give back as much as I can, and I've kind of and always be at the gyms that I'm teaching at, that I have affiliations with, kind of be that island or that safe harbor for people that may be in a situation where they don't have a regular coach or they're coming from, a bad situation like that. And I always tell them, come train. You need a place to come train. You need to come roll, come train. And I always advise people that, when I started, there weren't a lot of choices. You maybe had 4 clubs. Now there's 40 clubs to choose from. And I always recommend to people, I go and find a gym where the culture fits you, right? Don't go just because, this guy's they've got the best competition team in town, or he's a world champion, or he's got this social media profile. That's great, but that may not fit your needs or the way you see and you view jiu-jitsu. So I always tell people, go try a bunch of different clubs. The one that you think, because they're flashy, they're the number one on the Google search, they may not be the best one for you. It may be the smaller gym that's the best for you because that's where you click with the people, where you click with the instructor. So I think there's a lot more choice out there now that people don't necessarily have to get stuck in toxic situations, although it's still out there.
How do you tell people how do you tell people to think about these situations, or how do you tell people to think about the culture? What is the thing you are giving them to optimize for, especially when they're kind of young and new in the sport? They don't really have that framework to think about it like you did.
Yeah, I mean, the young guys are interesting, right? Because they all want to be a fighter, right? They all want to be, everyone's got that goal to be a world champion, which I think is great. I think it's very interesting that, evolution's not always necessarily a good thing. And so I started it's been 22 years now. Yeah, 22 years. Then I've been at jiu-jitsu. So I kind of was in the second wave. So still when it was very heavily focused on self-defense, starting from your feet, smashing the guy to the ground. being dominant that way. I've seen the evolution. I've seen the evolution of the art and of the sport. And I find it interesting that we're so focused on one rule set, the IBJJF rule set, right? Which is the biggest competition organization that's out there. And I want people to understand that they're a competition organization, right? They're a for-profit, we want your money to compete in membership thing. But it's a staggeringly low number of people. I think it's like less than 5% of people that are doing jiu-jitsu today actually compete. So I always go like, why are we so focused on one rule set of the sport and ignoring so many other pieces of the art? So first off, I ask them, what do you want to do? Do you want to compete? Do you even have an inkling of wanting to compete? So if you do, then you should be going and finding a club where they don't have to be necessarily 100% competition school, but at least there's some competition culture there. Maybe they have a competition team. They're training under the IBJJF rule set or whatever the rule set is that they're going to teach you that. If that's not your thing, then don't go to a school that's heavy in that. Go to a school if you want to learn self-defense and I hate the term hobbyist because, as you know, you get into a certain time frame of doing jiu-jitsu, and especially if by the time you get a purple belt, it's not a hobby, it's an addiction. Right? And people say it's a lifestyle. I go, no, it's 100% and it's addiction, right? I mean, there are days that, there's days that I hate jiu-jitsu. I hate that I even started it. I joke and I go, but I've been doing it for such a long time. It's so ingrained in my DNA now that I have to do it. So
call it a religion sometimes. Because you're just kind of devoted and you're like, I don't know why I'm still here some days. I don't even know if I believe this stuff, but I'm showing up. I sometimes eat differently. To me, it's just like another religion that we're all kind of like, yeah, maybe we're a part of it.
Yeah. So I always tell people, like, if you're going to start out first time, I love it if you come to the gym that I'm teaching at. But I'm open and honest with everybody. I go, as much as I think I do good jiu-jitsu and that I'm a decent person and that I'm okay at coaching and I've got some diverse experience, I may not be the coach for you. And I'm okay with that because you can't be everything to everyone. And I find that that's a problem with some gyms, right? Like they're like, well, I'm the best coach in the area. Like I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Okay, well that's great, right? That's you, that's your ego. So I always recommend like go around and try a few different spots, right? See what they're like. I always warn them. I go, if you're going to a gym and they're telling you that you can only train here and you've got to buy their rash guard, their gi, these are warning signs. These are warning signs, but you got to figure it out. If that's what you want, right? If you want to be told what to wear, when you need to show up, what you have to do day in and day out, awesome. But some people need that, right? Like some people need that, kind of structure in order to do that. So I always say, try out a bunch of different clubs, see where you fit within the culture of the students and also with the instructor. Look at the schedule, right? You may find a club that's awesome for you, but it doesn't fit your schedule. So life's about compromise. So you got to find those compromises. And I always tell people at the end of the day, we have this thing like, oh, we're doing a martial art, like, you're going to choose your team and you have to stick with that team for life. No. Let's be honest. It's become, a lot of gyms have become a business now, and and I do believe in loyalty. Like I do believe in loyalty. That if you've gone somewhere, if you've been somewhere for 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever it is, you've built some level of loyalty, friendship, and trust with the rest of the group. So leaving that situation is never easy. But I said, but if you're into it 2, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, 10 years, like in my situation, 10 plus years, and it doesn't fit you anymore. It doesn't match with your schedule, how you feel about jiu-jitsu, where you want to go. Then you have the right as an adult to get up and leave and go find something that's more appropriate for you. I mean, we do it in life all the time, right? You buy a car, you drive it, you go, this car's a piece of shit. I'm going to sell it and get rid of it. No one goes, oh, but you've been driving a Toyota your whole life. How dare you go and drive, a Honda now? You're a Creonte, right? You're a Creonte for going to Honda. Like, who fucking cares, right? Go and do what's right for you and be happy, and to be happy for you. So, that's kind of where I, try to be open and honest with people And with that, and just it's like anything else. You got to test drive it. You got to test drive it, see what fits with you, and then. But it's amazing, how many people kind of get coming through the door that are like, yeah, I'm trained at this club now, and things are kind of getting a little weird, and I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. So you've got to, kind of bring them in, give them a hug, tell them that listen, it's okay. The majority of us go through this at some point in our life. Some people, it's the blue belt blues where they disappear because, to me, life happens. Either life happens or you get to a point in your training, in your gym, where things just aren't working for you anymore, right?
Yep.
And you find excuses not to show up. But if you're in a gym, you're in a culture, you're around people that you really like, that they engage you outside of more than just the training side of it, you'll find an excuse to go.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what you want to do. You want to find a reason to go, that's your family, that's regardless if you're having a shitty day or not, or you're having the best day in your life, you just want to go there and be around those people, get your hour and a half of training in, and then, go back to real life. And then, you're looking forward to going back to it if you're there 3 days a week, 4 days a week, or, or you're a gym rat and you're there, 7 days a week, 3 classes a day, whatever that is, that fits for you.
I think there's something really nice about the community side of it. Like,
yeah.
I really struggled for a long time to find that. I struggled with it a little bit in New York City, and then I found the Globetrotters, and I was like, oh, there's a community of people that actually feel this community. And I couldn't quite get it in New York. It didn't really have the place for me. And then, when I came to Germany, I found that here in Berlin, and I felt like, oh, this is a group of people that I can feel good about when I show up. And if I show up and I have no desire to engage, I can still just do my thing. They know, hey, it's okay. That's an off day. And then, he'll be back in social another time. And I feel like that wasn't something someone explained to me early on. It was like, oh, here's where you're going to get good. And I'm like, well, what if I don't really care how good I get? I just sometimes want a little bit of exercise and some community and compassion for life.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is I find a lot of times you'll show and you'll teach things that you're good at. So let's just say, you go to a gym. Let's just say someone might be a world champion, right? But maybe their game, right? Maybe their game that they teach and their style of jiu-jitsu just doesn't work for you, right? So you're not going to enjoy going there, going, oh shit, I got to do, this style like 100. Like for me, if I was going to go to a gym, I can't go. I would have a hard time going to a gym where, we're guard pullers. I mean, guard pulling is right. I know. I came from a judo background. I look at it as a martial art, and I go, guard pulling should be a tactic, but it shouldn't be a strategy. And I know there's lots of guys who go, but this guy is a world champion. And I go, yeah, that guy's a world champion at guard pulling because the rule set allows guard pulling, right? Yeah. And I always go, and they. You always get into the argument with guys about self-defense and about you. I go, if you look at, let's look at a rule set that allows striking. If it's the UFC or it's combat jiu-jitsu, that when one person's down, you can hit them. They don't pull guard a lot, and there's a reason why. It puts you at a disadvantage.
Yep.
Now, I know guys that are great guard pullers, and when you play in the rule set of jiu-jitsu that rewards that type of activity, they're very good at it, right? But when their guard pulling fails and someone's really good at being at top, they're good at killing that guard pull, they're really good at passing guard, that's a tough day, right? Yeah. So I look at it going, I always want to be on top. Even if I start from the bottom, my goal is to get on top because you just have such an advantage with gravity, if you believe in gravity, right? Because there's a lot of people that don't believe in gravity anymore. So I think there's advantage there, but so I'm not a guard puller by practice, but can I teach guard pulling? Absolutely. So what I try to do, and that's why I say, like, you got to find a culture that works for you. So I tell my students when they come in, I go, don't try to emulate my game. What I try to do is I try to teach concepts versus technique, and I will use technique to reinforce the concept. And what the beautiful part about concepts is concepts work for everybody. Your white belt, black belt, male, female, 100 pounds, 300 pounds, whatever it is, concepts work for everybody if you apply them. So I said, you just have to decide, from a game planning standpoint, what do you want to do? And this is one of kind of the lessons in life, I take from jiu-jitsu that I put into regular life. You got to have a game plan, right? You got to understand what your A game is and how to implement that A game. So if you're going to be a guard puller, you need 3 setups for that guard pull, like minimum. Like I tell these people, like, what should I do when I come to class? What should I do? What should I focus on? I said, well, you got a game plan. So if you're a guard puller, you got to have 3 guard pull setups that work for you, right? As soon as you get down into that situation, you got to have 3 sweeps that work for you. And then you got to have your pins and then your submissions that work for you. So start from there, right? And it's vice versa. If you're a takedown person, you got to have 3 takedowns that work for you. You got to have 3 guard passes, 3 pins, and 3 submissions. So if you just start with that basic structure, then it really doesn't matter what gym you go to, right? You follow those concepts, you learn a bunch of takedowns, you learn a bunch of guard passes, you learn a bunch of pins and submissions, and you just figure out what works well for you. So, I always tell people, like, find a culture that allows you to develop jiu-jitsu in your style. Like, obviously, as your white belt and blue belt, you need a little bit more structure, but once you get into the higher levels of blue belt, especially when you get into purple belt, it's about developing your style. So your coach, like in my case, I like takedowns, but I've got guys that are phenomenal at guard pulling, right? And I'll joke and jab at them and tease them a little bit, but they're good for me to have in the gym because they're really good at guard pulling. So it's a counter to my game. So we have some good battles, and I get to see, in my technique, what works against someone who's doing some various guard pulls, and they get to see what works against someone who's not going to play that game, that wants to take them down and kind of crush them. So, and that's life, right? You got to have a game plan because it's not always going to work for you. You might meet up with someone who's got the complete opposite viewpoint that you do, or the, direction of where you're trying to go, and you got to find a way to navigate around that in life. So that's, kind of, as we get back to, like, how do I counsel people on what to do, is explore, find out. Your gut will tell you what's right. And if your gut tells you a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now that it's not right for you anymore, listen to it, right? And make that change. And
is that like one of the biggest things that you sort of took from jiu-jitsu off the mat, is like have a game plan? Or is that was that you beforehand and you're like, no, now when I'm doing on this stuff on the mat, I need to have a game plan?
I always need to have a game plan because and my other kind of philosophy is that, you have to have intention when you're training. Now, if you're showing up to a structured class, and let's just say the subject today is guard passing, right? We're going to learn to pass. We're doing these 3 guard passes. Okay, you got it. You that's your structure for the class. Focus on it. Do it. Do what you're told to do. Show up. Do the work. But if you're going to me, if it's at the end of class, if it's time for open rolls or you're going to an open mat, I always suggest, like, have that game plan. Don't waste 1 rep. Right? It's like you can go to the gym and you can say, I want to build my chest. I want to get stronger at bench press. And if all you do is go to the gym and you put on a weight that you can press like 100 times and you do 5 sets of that, you're not going to grow. I mean, you're going to you may build fantastic technique, like the best technique. Like, you could teach everybody the best technique on how to do a bench press. But when it actually comes to loading it up and trying to do your body weight or 2 times your body weight or something like that, you can't do shit because you haven't pushed yourself. You haven't stuck to a game plan for growth. So I tell people, I said, I don't care what it is, but let's just say it's, ultimately you want to be able to get to someone's back and rear naked choke them, right? Because to me, that's the ultimate position to get to. Take someone's back and choke them out, right? There's no defense to that. There's no like, yeah, you got lucky. No, there's no luck in that, right? You've taken someone down, you've taken them down, you've taken their back, you wrapped your arm around the neck, and you've squeezed till they tap till they get unconscious. So let's just say example, that's what it is. Focus on it for 6 weeks. Now, the first week, let's say you roll, you do 10 rounds. You may get to the back once, right? Maybe you don't get to the back at all, right? But your sole focus is whatever position you get into, try to think of what's that path to get to the back. And I guarantee you, after 6 weeks of doing that, you'll be getting people's backs consistently, right? And then you can start saying, well, now that I got your back, now I can start working on these things. I find a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms, like it's like shotgun, it's scattered. Like, we're going to come to class on Monday and we're going to teach these 3 techniques. And sometimes those 3 techniques aren't even linked, right? They're just sporadic.
Oh yeah.
And then you come back on Wednesday or you're the next class and we're teaching, you know, three things that are completely disconnected from what you were taught the class before. That doesn't help anybody, right? That doesn't help anybody. So so even when I'm teaching, I pick things kind of in 6 weeks blocks. So I'll say, you know, for the next 6 weeks, we're working on mount. And I'll start at very basic fundamental mount and I'll get as far as I can with the group for 6 weeks. I make note of where we stopped. And sometimes it could be, we may focus, you know, we'll start, you know, focusing maybe on bottom or top, whatever it is, and we'll blend a little bit of each into it. So I may say, hey, here are 3 key concepts for mount. You know, we'll work on that for a couple of weeks. Now I'm going to show you how you counter that on the bottom, right? So that you can be a little bit playful when you're doing the active drills. You know, you're building up that resistance, so the person on the bottom is not completely helpless, right? They're actually throwing some barriers up to you. And at the end of that 6 weeks, I'll kind of note where we were, so that when we come back, I can take a few steps back, kind of refresh everyone's mind of where we were, and then we can keep building on. So I try to do that in 6 weeks blocks, not technique specific, but position specific, so that we can go down weird rabbit holes, right? Depending on what the group is kind of into and what they're catching on to. Some things I can compress very quickly down. Other ones, the progression's going to be slow because it's just not clicking with everybody. But that also allows me to modify my teaching, really reinforce the concepts, and show that, hey, you remember when we were doing mount and I was teaching this concept? Well, you can apply it here too. So that they're seeing and hearing concepts, so that when they're looking at technique, or when they're rolling, or you know they're getting smashed in a roll, I can go back and say, hey, were you applying this concept, right? Yeah. Rather than going, well, white belt, third stripe, technique number 27 didn't work for me because I don't know technique number 28, right? Rather than, hey, this is a key fundamental concept in jiu-jitsu that works in these situations 100% of the time. Doesn't matter what your skill level is. I fucked it up. That's why I got pinned. That's why I got choked out, right? If I play by these rules, right, the rules of jiu-jitsu, you know, the physics of jiu-jitsu, if I had followed the rules of the physics of jiu-jitsu, that would never have happened. And I think a guy that, you know, that kind of showed that from a defensive standpoint was Pritt, right? With all his defensive jiu-jitsu, he showed that there's some very fundamental concepts to defensive positions on the bottom that if you just do it, it works. And it frustrated a lot of people, and he still gets a lot of flack on it.
He still gets a lot of hate, yeah.
He still gets a lot of hate, but he gets hate because it works. Because it rocks the you know, the foundation of jiu-jitsu, right? And it exposes a lot of the bad habits that we've formed to follow this, you know, this sport, right? To follow this rule set of sport. And you know, because if you think about it, you know, back in the day, I mean, jiu-jitsu was developed, or martial arts were developed to, you know, literally fight other people, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you look at the UFC, when the UFC first started, it was style against style. It was jiu-jitsu against karate. It was a boxer against a wrestler. Now it's just jiu-jitsu against jiu-jitsu. So it's kind of weird. Like, sometimes I have to stop and step back when I start doing a roll with somebody, going, I'm playing into this game. Like, I'm automatically doing things just because I've been conditioned to do it. Why am I doing that, right? Take a step back. You know, be a little weird. Be unconventional, because that's usually what happens, right? Like, you know, people say, like, who are the most dangerous and most difficult people to roll with? It's the brand new person. You know, that spazzy white belt, because you have no idea what they're going to do because they don't know the rules of jiu-jitsu, right? They don't know the rules. So that's where you really test to see, like, does your stuff work against someone that doesn't know the rules? So they're not going to play by the rules, and you have no idea how they're going to react. They could panic. They could be cool as ever. They may just inherently be strong enough to just pick you up and slam you to the ground, like do things to you that you're not used to doing. So, you know, it's kind of fun that way. So that's why I say, you know, stick to the game plan, understand the concepts, and always have that defensive mindset, like always protect yourself.
I'm a big fan of the first be annoying, then be dangerous kind of mindset.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I think Charles Harriott has that shirt, and once I saw it, I was like, oh, I need that, because that's my style. I love being annoying on the ground, and then people are like, why isn't any of this working? And then that's my opportunity.
Yeah, frustration, right? Frustration is
very entertaining.
it's very entertaining, and you can do it from both top and bottom. For me, I like to do it on top, pin people down so they can't move, and then you're like, I know you're hiding that hand. You know I want it. You don't want to give it up to me, but I'm going to frustrate you so much that you're going to stick that hand out to try to get away, and then it's mine, right? And that's the fun part of of jiu-jitsu, and I think a life lesson for that is, you got to embrace the suck, right? You got to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and you have to do hard things, and you got to and it's funny, growing up, when I was growing up, I'm in my 50s now. There were no participation medals. It's right. If you played sports or you did things, you either won or you lost, right? You were either the A student or you were the failing student. And if you failed, you got held back a year, right? Or, your desk got put at the front of the class, for the teacher. So there were things that identified who were the winners and who are the losers. I'm sure using winners and losers is going to offend somebody that's watching this, right? And I'm sorry about that, right? Deal with it. But now, everything's a participation medal. Like we want equity of outcome, right? And I fully believe in equity of opportunity. Like everyone should be given the equal opportunity to succeed in life and do things, but nowhere in nature is there equity of outcome. And I find that's a lesson that people are going to find very hard to learn as we're going on. There's all these cultural shifts and changes that are trying to be forced by corporations and institutions trying to force this equity of outcome. And you look at any sport, and that's why I love sports, right? And let's just look at jiu-jitsu. We have age divisions, we have weight divisions, and we have belt divisions, right? Trying to give you an equity of opportunity, right? You have two 155-pound black belts that get on the mat, right? Go. Guess what? Someone has to win, someone has to lose. That's not equity of outcome, right? You got equity of opportunity. Both have that opportunity to win, but you're not going to. Same with any sports team, right? Look at football, right? 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense, right? We're all playing the same length of time, but guess what? Someone wins, someone loses. And I think that's one big lesson, I think, for anyone that does a sport like this, especially physical sport, where it's you physically going against someone else, is you soon learn that life's not fair, right? You have all the intention to win. You've put all this training and effort and energy into it. You've prepared things. You've come, hopefully you've come in with your A game ready to go. And sometimes your A game's gonna win, and other times that guy, his A game destroys yours, right? And you're just going to get smashed. And you just got to figure out, like, okay, why did it happen? Get up, dust yourself off, and think about it for a minute, and then forget about it, right? Tomorrow's another day. Go back to the drawing board and figure out why that happened. So the next time you meet up with that person, right, hopefully the outcome comes in your favor. So I think it's a big lesson, I think, from competitive, and I say competitive sport. I mean, you don't have to be you don't have to be competing at a high level, but competitive in the fact that it's you against someone else. Yeah.
It can happen in the gym. It can happen during a regular sparring session.
It can happen during a regular sparring session. It could be baseball, football, jiu-jitsu, even playing chess, right? You look at chessboard. You each have the same number of pieces, right? Now, someone gets the opportunity that they get to go first.
Yeah.
Right? So even then, it's not equity of opportunity, right? It's someone gets to go first. Well, that's that could be advantage or disadvantage.
Yeah.
Right. And that. So I think that's a big thing in life is got to have a game plan, and just remember that there's always going to be winner, there's always going to be loser, right? And and sometimes there's compromise, but even when you compromise, you got to give something in order to get something, right? You got a give. You're not always going to get 100% of what you want all the time.
What's like the biggest lesson that you, like the unexpected lesson that you got from martial arts that you kind of took out into, daily life?
Wow, that's a good, because I've been doing it for so long. As much as we talk about, what's great about jiu-jitsu is, you leave your ego at the door. It's not true. Ego is involved in everything, right? And, you see it because everyone wants to succeed, everyone wants to win, and I even find it sometimes myself. Like I'll be in a role, and every once in a while the ego kicks in. You're like, ah, shit, like why did that happen? You kind of get mad at yourself. So I think ego plays a big part in everything. We all have it. It just comes down to having a healthy relationship with it. And so to me, it was, it's, as I said, kind of coming back to like learning to be comfortable, being uncomfortable. And I think the other thing too, for me, I don't think it was, I won't say necessarily unexpected, but I think it's a great part of it is when you do hard things, right? It makes you resilient. It gives you calm. It gives you calmness in the storm. Like, I hope I don't. You're only as hard as the hardest thing that you do, right? So if the hardest thing that you do is, I don't know, order coffee in the morning, right? And you go and someone screws up your coffee, and we've all seen it, right? You've gone somewhere and you're like, why is this person freaking out? It's a cup of coffee. Just hey, it's wrong. Get another thing, right? But that might be the hardest thing that person's doing in their day, right? Is that coffee, and not getting it right just throws them right off. So, do hard things, builds resiliency. But I think, and also in that, it's understand, and once again, it's understanding that, you don't know what that other person's going through. So to have that compassion and that empathy, for them. I mean, there's going to be assholes that are out there that, deserve what they get. But just regular folks is just kind of sit back and don't necessarily throw judgment right away. Because as I say, you don't understand what the hardship is that person might be going through. They don't have the same life experiences that you do. And, at the end of the day, as long as it's not impacting, your life, right, or endangering someone's life, just let things go. Right, and I think that's a hard thing for people to do, is that ego check, and part of it's that ego check is just to let things go.
So when you're not doing jiu-jitsu, like, what do you use to find balance?
Yeah. So one thing I started doing, it's probably about 2 years ago now. I read before, but I might read for a week or two, or read a book and then put it down and not read anything consistently. So I said, I'm going to be consistent. First thing I'm going to do every morning is I'm going to get up and I'm going to read, right, for half hour, 45 minutes. Nonfiction, right? I haven't read, other than I went back maybe 2 months ago and I reread 1984. But 1984 really, 1984 is really not, is really not fiction, right? If you look at what's kind of going on now, it's not really, right? But I decided on.
It was when it was written, fortunately.
It was when it was written, but it's not now, right? Which is a whole different conversation on that kind of stuff. But I said I want to read nonfiction. I want to educate myself. If I'm going to sit down, I'm going to read a book. I want to educate myself, and I find that a lot of people are, I call them headline readers, right? So they'll see something posted, and it'll say, it'll just be like a salacious headline on something that may not even be what the article's even about. But they read that headline, they read a few lines, and then automatically that becomes their truth and that becomes their knowledge. And they go, oh, well, I read this. Well, what did the article say? What was it really? Well, I don't know. I just read the headline. So I'm like, I want to have an informed opinion, right? Like, everyone has a right to their opinion, but not every opinion has the right to be heard, right? That's a tough one to swallow for some people. Right? You can have your opinion, but it doesn't mean that it should be heard. So I like to have conversations with people that have informed opinions. And the only way you get an informed opinion is to me, the biggest thing is reading, right? You have to read. You have to go and find different sources and all this. So I've read everything. So as we were talking about before we started, right now I've got one book on the go. It's called The History of Canada in 10 Maps, right? So I'm Canadian. I took Canadian history, but I'm learning some new things about Canadian history through these guys that explored Canada, developed these maps for Canada, and everything was kind of going on there. So I've read everything from, Canadian history to philosophy to, conspiracy theory, stuff, like kind of everything. I don't limit myself because,
it's funny. I did the same thing, but I took the opposite approach of like, I was like, I want to read. And I started reading almost exclusively fiction for the last 2 years. And I'm reading like 30 to 40 books a year.
Yeah.
but only like one or two were nonfiction. So I literally had the same thought as you and just did the exact opposite thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's weird. And listen, and I don't care. I mean, reading is just it's mental exercise.
Yeah.
But I wanted to add some. I want to add that knowledge because I read so much fiction in the past. So I just want to. I want to learn more. I want to be educated. And there's some really interesting people out there. And some of it was, it started reading, books on, because I'm in business, so on leadership. So I think everyone's read, Jocko's book on, on leadership, or
Extreme Ownership.
the extreme ownership, or Goggins' books like Never Give. Like everyone's kind of read those books, and then I started going down some different stuff. So like for example,
I gotta be honest, I've never read either one of those books.
Yeah, well, I think you're doing okay, right? But I've read a lot of leadership books just
Same.
because I'm in a position of business where I coach and lead. I'm a leader and I'm a mentor at work, so trying to find different strategies and how people approach that. But I'm like I want to read history, I want to read philosophy, but I also want to read the opposing. I want to read about opposing opinions to what I have, because I think that's another thing that we need to understand, is that just the belief system that you have now, right, and what you believe now doesn't necessarily have to believe what you believe tomorrow. And a lot, in politics, they call it, flip-flop, right? But people change, right? We all change, right? You see, I mean, look at yourself 10 years ago. You're not the same person.
Thankfully, no.
No, you're not. Exactly, right? Like, if people think about who you were just 10 years ago, they may have a totally different opinion about who you are now. Now, some people, who they were 10 years ago, it's who they are now. Other people have changed, maybe for the better, sometimes for the worse. So I like to read things that, that challenge me, so that I can change, that I can grow. Sometimes I read stuff and go, yeah, this is complete bullshit. It hasn't changed my opinion. I've read other stuff and I go, oh yeah, you know what? Now I understand the other side, right? At least I have an understanding of the other side of where they're coming from, so that if I have a conversation or discussion with someone that has an opposite view of me, right, at least I can have somewhat of an informed opinion of why I believe and what I believe versus what they believe, rather than, we're all the same, right? We all want the same thing. We want a roof over our head. We want to be able to eat, right? We want to be able to, have a few nice things, hang out with our friends and do stuff. The rest of it, you really don't care that much about. But if you live in social media, it's a totally different world, right?
Yeah.
Conspiracy theories, you got to hate this person. If you have this viewpoint, you're completely wrong, blah, 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 blah. And I just think if people read more, understood where these things are coming from, and then actually have informed opinion conversations. Because, I mean, when I was growing up, we had Discord, right? You could sit down and you could talk with your friends that had, they liked a different sports team, they had a different political view, they had this or that. But at the end of the day, no one cared, right? Or, we had the schoolyard fight. You had a disagreement when you're a friend. You had a fight. Someone got punched in the mouth, got a bloody lip. It was over and done with. You hugged and you went out and you hung out after that. Now it's just like there's got to be this massive gap in divide that's out there. And I think that's, it's unfortunate, but I think that's one of the beautiful things about jiu-jitsu is, one of the truths that's about it is when you step on the mat, all that kind of goes away, right? I mean, you have people from every socioeconomic standpoint in life. You've got people of different religions, people of different ethnic backgrounds, totally different experiences, and none of that really matters, right? None of that really matters. Like, you may be a high-powered executive, right, where you go to work and everyone comes to you and you have all the power, but you come into the mat and you're getting the shit kicked out of you by a 25-year-old kid that's like a plumber's assistant or apprentice, right? does not have the social status that you do, that maybe had to take the subway train to get to work where you drove your BMW, and they kick the shit out of you. They just crush you, right?
Humility.
That's what builds a healthy ego.
Yep.
Right? That's what I love about jiu-jitsu. Along with that is, no matter if you're having a good day, bad day, I think just show up, train, and at the end of it, you'll be happy that you did it. Whatever the physical activity is, whatever that outlet is, we all have that hesitation that it's just easier to sit on the couch and not do anything. But if it's go for that run, go to jiu-jitsu, go for a bike ride, just go to the gym and lift weights, like just free your mind for 45 minutes, for 2 hours, it's just so much better overall for your mental health and I think in your development. Not that I'm a mental health expert, but I can just tell you from my experience that when I'm having a bad day, if I just go and train, whatever that training is, I feel so much better, right?
So that's the one of the things I wanted to ask was like what role jiu-jitsu plays in your life now. But I mean, you've sort of been alluding to it as like it's your leveling field, like playing field
100%.
leveler. Like it gives you the freedom to think, it gives you the freedom to express, it gives you the freedom to escape if that's what you want that day. Like, what is it for you in terms of balance and in terms of role in your life?
Yeah, so to me, like we've talked about a lot of lessons learned through it, but to me, it's really it's therapy, right? It's my outlet, it's my therapy, it's my time. You know, it's a group activity, but yet it's still an individual activity, right? It's up to you to go and do it. It's like you can't sit on the bench and still. You can play another team sport and you can be the guy on the bench, right? And the team still wins and you still get some accolades for that, right? You have to do jiu-jitsu, right? And that's why, both my kids, they tried it, they didn't like it, and I had some people like going, "Oh, your kids aren't jiu-jitsu. Why aren't they in jiu-jitsu? Why don't you make them jiu-jitsu?" I go, because that's not what they want to do. If that's not their thing, you can't force someone to go get twisted up, choked out, have their joints bent, thrown to the ground. We're a strange brew, right? There's something wrong. I don't want to say there's something in general society. We say there's something wrong with you, right? But it takes a unique mindset to go and put yourself through that kind of physical and mental, because there's a lot of mental anguish in it. Kind of abuse and adversity on a regular basis, right? So it's not for everyone. I always encourage my kids, like, I want you to have an athletic or a sport outlet, whatever it is, just because it's so beneficial to you from a mental health standpoint, right? As a kind of that therapy standpoint, and also you're doing hard stuff. And if you do hard stuff long enough, right, consistently, right, and I think that's one of the lessons learned. It's about consistency over the long term. You're going to have ups, you're going to have downs, you're going to hit plateaus, and sometimes you're going to have like massive growth, and then you're going to peak, and then you're not going to see, any additional growth maybe for months or years, because you've kind of, for whatever reason, you kind of hit this plateau. So, it really puts out about longevity, right? That if you're going to do this, you're in it for the long run. It's not, well, I'm going to do jiu-jitsu for 3 years, I'm going to become a world champion, and then I'm done. Okay, you'll be a white belt world champion, great, right? But if you want to get to a black belt, if you want to do this over it's about longevity and dealing with that, dealing with, your work, dealing with your family, dealing with your health. Like right now, I've been in a cast for 4 weeks. I got 2 more weeks to go because I had to have reconstructive ankle surgery. Just from years of wear and tear, the ligament was gone, and one of the tendons was like an old elastic band that needed to be cut and tightened back up again. So my adversity for 6 weeks is being in a cast and figuring out, how do I keep myself sane? Can't do jiu-jitsu, right? I can go and I can kind of teach and be involved there, but now I've kind of thrown some other things in, physical activity wise, just to challenge myself and to push myself. So I have that bit of adversity in my life that I'm kind of addicted to, like physical adversity. I'm just kind of addicted to it. And I think you have to be in order to do jiu-jitsu over a long period of time. You got to be smart.
What's the kind of advice you would give somebody who's like going through an injury, and as somebody who's dealt with it? I mean, I've done martial arts for 35 plus years. I've had injuries that have kept me off the mat for a year. Like, what's your piece of advice for somebody who's like about to go through this, whether it's 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 4 months, whatever?
Yeah. So now I'm not a doctor, right? So a doctor may comment on this, but to me, my experience has been as long as you're not like, you don't have screws and plates, and you've got you've got fresh stitches and all that kind of stuff. Train around your injuries. Now, training around your injuries might be just doing, okay, well, I broke my leg, so I'm going to do a bunch of push-ups and sit-ups every day. Like, just challenge yourself to say, okay, after, I'm going to be in a cast for 6 weeks, so I can't run, I can't do all these things. So what I've done is I have an Echo, like an assault bike, right? Both at the gym and at home. So I've used that before quite a bit. But I said, here's some adversity. Get on that bike, right? Started an 8-week program, right, with some very specific goals in it. But I'm only going to have one leg to use. Okay, so number one, I'm not going to have the performance. So understand, you're not going to have the performance they had before, right? So there's no way I can bike at the same level and have the same output with one leg versus two. So number one, ego check, right? Number one, ego check there. But it's that adversity. But so I've got to, you got to find a way to still be physically active, whatever that is. I find if, going to the dojo for some people is still, to me, it's not a bad idea to sit there and watch and learn and still kind of take that notes and view it from the outside, right? And maybe you're going to pick up and you're going to see stuff about it. But to me, it's just, you need to be active. And for me, I think just being physically active, it's blood flow, it's keeping your body moving and working, to me, can't be bad for the healing process. And so that when you come out of it, right, you're ready to go. Now, for me, I knew the surgery was coming up, so I specifically did things leading up to surgery, and developed some routines that I knew that activities that I could do with the cast on. Now, if it had been something like, I had an accident, I broke my leg, it might have been a little bit different because it's kind of came out of nowhere. But we've all had injuries, and I just find, just adapt, right? Adapt, overcome, find ways to stay active and keep training. And I find, a couple of years ago, I had a tear in my rotator cuff, front and back. So
that's a rough one.
It was a rough one, and and I went to see the orthopedic surgeon. He's like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to push it. I want to push it with physio as far as I can. I don't want to necessarily do surgery." And he said, "We can do cortisone shots and all stuff." I said, "Give me 6 months to see doing some physiotherapy where I can get." And I was still training, but what I had to learn at that point is I had to protect that arm, right? I had to protect that arm at all costs. So it actually improved my defensive game on the bottom, because I didn't have all my limbs to use. So I was very limited in movements that I could use and where I could go. So it actually helped me. And it was actually about the time when Pritt was kind of hitting the scene with his defensive postures. And, like that running man where you're keeping that elbow in tight, that saved me, right? It saved my life. It's like it came to me at the right time. And so I was forced for like a year to play a very defensive game. So it really helped me develop a better defensive position, and as I developed better defense, it allowed me to understand offense better, because I knew what I was doing to defend very aggressive offense from people and why they weren't getting it. So when I flipped it on the other side, it gave me a better understanding of what's high-level defense. And if someone's got high-level defense, these are things that you don't go for until you kind of break it down. So it was kind of weird. That injury led to me developing a skill set, forcing me to develop a skill set that actually made another one better, right?
Yeah.
So, you can sit on the couch and you can whine and complain and wallow, and you can watch Netflix, and you can, eat your ice cream and get fat over 6 weeks while you're going through an injury, or you can just find a way to stay active and keep at it, and keep going. So I advise people, if they can, still train. It may not be the level that you want, but you can still set goals. You can still have intention on what you're doing, and just continue to be active mentally and physically. We just need to continue to be active in order to grow and to thrive. And I think you have to understand, if you're going to be in this for a long time, I mean, we're doing a combat art. Things are going to get hurt.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think you've gone to a jiu-jitsu school where there hasn't been at least a dozen different rolls of athletic tape out for fingers and knees and elbows and ankles and all that stuff. So you're going to get hurt. You got to be smart about it. Do what you can. Don't hurt yourself more. But just because you've got an injury doesn't mean that you can't find a way to still train.
Yeah. If you could give everybody one piece of advice, I don't care, jiu-jitsu, professional life, like what would that piece of advice be?
Show up and do the work.
That's good.
Right? It's simple, and I do it from a jiu-jitsu standpoint, and I do it at work. All I want you to do is show up and do your job, right? I don't need you to be a superstar. I don't need you to necessarily do more than what it is. But if your work is to do A, B, and C, do A, B, and C. If all you're doing is A and B, you're not pulling your weight. So if you're in jiu-jitsu, so I always say this is the hard part. The coach and the instructor doesn't have a choice. They have to show up to class, right? You as a student have that choice. You can sit on the couch and not go to class, or you go to class, but your coach is going to be there. So your job as a student is to make a commitment to yourself, to your coach, and to your team. Maybe all you can do is train once a week. Maybe that's all you can do. And maybe you can train 7 days a week, 3 times a day, right? We all have different things. But whatever that is, that's your job. Show up and do your job, because other people are relying on you in the real world. They're relying on you to do your portion of the job that allows them to do their job. But also in the sports world, in jiu-jitsu, they're relying on you to show up to be a good training partner. And it doesn't matter if you're the brand new white belt or you're the grizzly old brown belt, that's been training for a decade, right? You both have a role to play in showing up to be a good training partner, to share knowledge, to transfer knowledge, and to be there for your other teammates. So to me, it's a real show up, do the work, just do your job. That's all it is. I think it's very simple and it's easy. And if more people just did that, the world might be a better place.
I think I hope that's the truth, and I hope more people do that. Is there anything that you'd like to promote or anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys are into buying instructionals, I've got a couple on BJJ Fanatics. I did them a few years ago, and as we talked about earlier, I like to teach concepts. So those 2 videos, kind of are how at least I start teaching some of the key concepts using certain positions. One's on using a modified Kezugatami, and the other one is back attacks. So it's been, I did those a couple of years ago. They're still selling. So if you want to go out and you want to buy some instructionals, go check them out. They're on there. If you want free content, we talked about Globetrotters before. I love Globetrotters. I'll always pump it up. They've got their free, they have all their free content on their YouTube channel. I think there's like 400 or 500 free videos on there. So if you want to check out my teaching style, I think I've got 7 or 8 free classes on there. You can check it out. If you like what I do and you want to buy something, go ahead and buy it. Like I said, I'm not trying to put out a massive amount of content and trying to make a lot of money off it, because that's not my primary source of income. But they're out there if people want to take it.
I'll put it in the show notes, and if somebody wants to find you on Instagram, Jits Rolls and
Jits Rolls, yeah, I'm on Facebook too. I did TikTok for a while, and then I find TikTok was just a complete mind virus, and it was just, I spent too much time there just looking at shit, and I went, you know what, I'm done with this. I can't do it. I got to get rid of it. So yeah, Instagram is probably where I spend, where I do most of my activity, which is not a whole lot, but I still do post some content on there and a few fun things. If they want to come and check it out.
Thanks a lot for your time, Matt.
All right, appreciate it, Eric.
Yep.
Thanks.
Hey, Matt, welcome back for round 2 of this, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to try this again with you.
Hey, yeah, no, not a problem. Yeah, as we were talking about earlier, kind of looking back and watching some of the other episodes that have already been posted, I'm going like, we didn't really talk about much outside of jiu-jitsu. So how's that going to work? Kind of goes against what your plan was here. So glad to have the opportunity to come back and talk about the things I do outside of jiu-jitsu, but kind of lessons learned and how things kind of carry over into life off the mats.
Yeah, and this was it was a good thing that we did this, that you did that with me the first time, because I really learned like a whole bunch about how to talk to people, to get the things out of them that I want, and realize that, hey, what we did the first time, well, an absolutely interesting conversation that everybody just listened to. There is an entirely second part of this that that we're going to get to. To jump right in, the first thing I kind of want to talk to you about is your corporate life. You just tell me a little bit about what you do on the corporate side.
Yeah, so kind of give you a little background. When I was growing up, I was always, I kind of had a really good idea when I was in high school that I wanted to be an engineer, right? I always, I remember kind of some fond memories as a kid. My aunt, I spent a lot of time visiting her, and she was always like, a broken clock, a broken radio or something like that. And I would sit down with, a set of tools and take it apart and try to put it back together again. Wasn't always successful, but I was always kind of toying around and playing around with things like that. So in high school, wasn't the best at physics, but enjoyed chemistry and the sciences. So I decided, hey, engineering seemed to be the right path for me. So I ended up, because of my love of chemistry, going into chemical engineering. So did that. And while I was in chemical engineering, we had electives outside of our engineering practice. So I took a bunch of business courses, and I really enjoyed it. So I thought, how can I blend this technical side with the sales side of it? So I lucked out. During the summers, I'd worked with the Power Commission doing environmental testing for them. So I really got a feel of what it felt like to be in a plant doing kind of process engineering work, and I enjoyed it. But there was something missing, right? I didn't want to be stuck in one location doing the same thing day in and day out. So I started, I'll call it kind of technical sales, where I was using my engineering background and the scientific process to solve problems, but yet still in a sales role. So I started doing what we call specialty chemicals into the pulp and paper industry, and kind of moved around, a bit for a few years. Lived in Northern Ontario, which was a fun experience. Kind of out in the wilderness, living off of Lake Superior. Short summers that were hot and long winters that were cold and buried in snow. And then, so it's been about 20 years since the company that I'm currently with. And in this role, it's, people ask me, they always ask me, what do you do for work? And I always say, well, I sell legal white powder across international borders. And I always kind of get like, what the hell are you talking about? So the legal white powder is starch, right? Doesn't sound very exciting, but
no, white powder sounds way more exciting.
It sounds way better, right? It sounds way better. But the company I work for, a pretty big company, global company, and they're heavily involved in food ingredients. But on a side part of that business, and it's still a decent piece of our business, we have what we call our industrial application. So I don't like the term industrial because it just sounds dirty. People think about smokestacks and poison going into the rivers and all those things. But what we do is we sell starch primarily in US.
How do you define industrial, just so I can get a good
for us in our company, it's anything that's not being ingested, right? That's not going, that you're not eating, right? So we've got our food business and we've got our industrial business. So it's interesting that, so what we've been doing for, in our company for 150, 175 years is we've been converting primarily in North America corn, right? So if you're driving through the Midwest of the US, through Iowa and Indiana, Illinois and all that stuff, like you see vast amounts of corn being grown. Well, the majority of that corn doesn't actually go into human consumption, right? About 30 to 35% of corn grown in North America goes right into ethanol, right? So it's a huge number, right? So, and about what we, and then it's about, I don't know, animal feeds and another big part of it, right? For all the cattle that's out there.
Are there like different grades of corn for different kinds of things? And so do they go at different price points?
Yeah, they go at different price points, and obviously, the corn you eat and the corn that we're using, does not taste very good, right? It's a very high starch content, and that's why we use it, because we're trying to extract the starch from the corn kernel. So it's a pretty interesting, I won't go too technical into it. It's pretty interesting. You basically steep the corn, right? You soften it up, it swells, and then you put it through a bunch of different kind of mechanical separation. So we try to take everything from that outside shell, that fiber of the corn, to the gluten, which is the protein side of it, to the oils, and then we extract the starch, and that either gets refined into evil high fructose corn syrup, right? Depending on what you believe, on that side of it, we do a lot of stuff on high fructose corn syrup, and then we dry starch as well for food applications. But then what I do is on the industrial side of it, and primarily, historically, the big business for us is into the paper and packaging industry. So, but there's probably 300 plus what I'll call industrial or non-food applications for starch.
How long does that process take of the refinement into packaging? Like you said, you steep it, you do all these other things. Like, is that a 1 day, a 1 month?
Yeah, I mean, steeping takes usually a couple hours. So, we're producing millions of pounds of starch, kind of a day, depending on the size of the plant that we have. So then we're selling basically, we call it an ingredient. It's just, it's a nice term for like the raw material, into the paper industry. So we can sell what we say, call an unmodified starch. So it's just the starch, it's dried, we clean it. And we sell it as is, or we do certain modifications to it. We can put a charge onto the starch, which is used in the paper industry to help bind the starch to the paper, to help the paper form properly, and we can do some other things too to change the viscosity of the starch, and things like that. So paper and packaging or corrugated box. And so when I came into the business, I started on our corrugated box side of it. So if you think of, people say cardboard. Cardboard is kind of like your cereal box, right? It's just one heavy kind of, sheet of board. But what we do a lot so we do business in that as well. But we do a lot of business in the corrugated industry. So if you think of like an Amazon box, like that brown box you get from Amazon,
like packing boxes or moving boxes, or
moving boxes. So if you look at it, if you look at the standard box, there's kind of 3 layers to it, right? You got 2 outside layers, and then you have that inside layer that's wavy, that's corrugated. So we actually sell. So we do 2 things. We sell starch that goes into that paper, which in North America, and I think in Europe too, it's primarily recycled. So we use starch to make that paper to give it strength, right? Because recycled fiber is not as strong as virgin fiber, right? And you can typically recycle fiber 5 to 6 times before it kind of really loses its strength, and then you have to burn it, landfill it, do something different with it. So we add starch into that process of making that grade of paper. And then we use starch to make the adhesive to stick it together. So as I say, it doesn't sound very exciting, but it's amazing, if you go through the process of what it takes to make that Amazon box that you just, you don't even think about. You just rip it open, take your thing out, and then you toss it into your recycling bin. There's actually a lot that has gone into making that box. So
I actually think this stuff is fascinating. Like, I think it's interesting to think about all of the technology and little pieces and time that goes into making these things that people just don't think about.
Right, you take it for granted, right? And I mean, in some of these machines that the machines that are used to make paper and then also make a corrugated box. I mean, these sometimes they were they're smaller, but they've become huge, right? A modern corrugated machine is you can get a 300-inch wide machine that's running at 1,500 feet per minute, spewing out sheets of corrugated board. So it's quite an interesting thing to see. So you get to play the chemistry side of it because we're dealing with the formulation to make the glue to make it stick. So there's some things you have to do there, but we also act kind of as process engineers and consultants for their entire process. So the engineering side of what I did played into it as very well. So it was a nice mix of that. So I kind of moved up through the organization.
Sorry, I have one other question that while we were talking about this, all of these new packing materials and box materials that have come around in the last 2 or 3 years, like the like edible packaging and fungus and stuff, like how much of that kind of thing is that like a jeopardizing the business? Is that something where you guys are thinking about different ways to do it, or are you mostly focused on corn or starch based things as your source?
I mean, so what we're doing now is we're looking now at I always say we've been in the business of sustainable packaging for 150 plus years. We've just been waiting for the rest of the world to jump on it. Because 10 years ago people would talk about sustainability and it was great, but like anything else, if it cost more, they didn't want to do it. But now it's part of business, right? You look at any major corporation that's out there, and you read their they're putting out a financial annual report, but they're also putting out a sustainability report too. What they're talking about, how they're reducing their carbon footprint, what they're doing with water and energy and all those things. So that sustainability piece of it is becoming very big, and we've been doing it for a while. And so it's finally kind of catching on now. So we're doing things now outside of our traditional paper and boxes, we're getting into some very like food packaging. You take your McDonald's hamburger wrap, right, or whatever it is, or your pizza box, your French fry. So they were adding things called fluorochemicals, which are forever chemicals, right? You digest them; they're in your system forever, right? They're in the environment forever. They're great at preventing the grease from leaking through onto your lap, and ruining your new shirt or your new pants, but environmentally they're not good for you. So we have come up with starch-based chemistry that provides oil and grease resistance, right? And looking at barrier chemistries using starch. You've seen Pepsi and Coca-Cola come out with their plant-based bottle, so they're using starch to replace oil-based products, because basically starch is a natural polymer, like a plastic. So you're starting to see a lot of food packaging now trying to implement starch to replace oils and synthetics. One, that it's a renewable resource, but also trying to get into when it's going to landfill for its life cycle, that we throw it in the garbage. If it's plastic, it's going to be there 10,000 years from now. Now we're trying to find packaging that will degrade down. So we actually have a customer, and they make specialty foam packaging for wine. So if you're buying a $500 bottle of wine, right? They go and they have very special packaging for this to protect it. But this foam that they have, if you put it under the sink in hot water, it completely dissolves.
That's so cool.
Right? Yeah. So there's some really cool things that are going on out there. We've got another customer that's making a meat packaging tray that actually, and they make the tray and the film. And the tray and the film actually outperform standard packaging, that the meat stays fresher and longer than normal packaging. But once again, it's you can throw it into landfill, you can throw it, and it will, after a while, it will break down into its components and doesn't have the same environmental impact. So there's a lot of stuff. As I say, last 10 years there's been some innovation in it, but a lot of people are like, well, if it costs more, if it doesn't work just as well, we don't want to use it. But now it's kind of forcing it. So now we're starting to see big food companies looking at, well, how's our packaging going to fit? And it's interesting too. It's a generational thing. If you look at what's going on now with the younger generations, they're very much, if you look at marketing, they're very much concerned with what they buy and how it impacts the environment, right? Yeah. So they may look at two competing products and go, okay, they do the same thing, but this one has a package that, well, I'm gonna have to throw out, and it's gonna, it's got forever chemicals in it or whatever. It's gonna go to landfill. Or I've got this other nice packaging and I can recycle it. It's biodegradable. It's compostable. Yeah. Maybe a little bit more expensive, but from their ethical view on the environment, they'll buy the more expensive one because it has less impact on carbon footprint.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really hoping gets a little bit more standardized is, like, most companies, Amazon being a big one, put sustainability scores on their products, but the sustainability, how you get to that score and what goes into it is kind of black boxy, especially when you look at some of the fashion companies. They throw away millions and millions of items of clothing into just landfills. And there's it might be sustainably produced, but they're not taking into account the backside of that. So it's really cool to hear that your industry is taking into account both sides, both production and disposal.
Yeah. And the thing is, like in North America, and Europe's a lot, Europe, from my understanding, is better, but in North America, I mean, it's like maybe a third of what goes in the recycle bin actually makes it back into the process. So they'll recycle.
It's not much better in Europe,
right? They'll recycle paper and cardboard boxes and all that thing. They get the fiber sources, and then aluminum and glass, right? Because aluminum glass they're infinitely recyclable, right? But plastics, not so much. They're hard. It depends on the type of plastic that you have, the cleanliness of it. So a lot of that goes into landfill, and or they put it on a barge and they ship it off to another country, and they let someone else deal with it. Right? So I know it's very dirty, and and I know everyone talks about the garbage patch that's floating around the Pacific, right? I mean, they say it's the size of Texas. I mean, there's actually, I think there's two of them now that are out there floating that are just full of plastics and garbage and trash that's out there. So we do a lot with it. I know Europe's a little bit ahead of what North America's doing, where they're actually burning waste for energy, which can be done very cleanly. You can scrub, you scrub the gases that are coming out from there. You can produce, liquid hydrogen gas, from that. You can produce, a lot of different products, and the energy from it too. So it's kind of like, plastics are basically, it's oil. It's what it was before. We burn oil, you can burn the plastics. So it can be an outlet for energy source, but people just have it in their mind, like, I'm burning garbage, right? They're thinking of like, you've got your fire pit in the backyard and you throw some tires in there and you get black smoke. It's not like that. I mean, the technology's there to make to make it very clean and to do carbon capturing and to capture hydrogen and do other things. So basically you're producing, you're producing water, which is really the worst thing that you're putting back out in the environment. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there, but so we're glad about it. It's catching on, and so we've got some exciting stuff that we're working on right now on what we're calling advanced packaging materials to kind of help address that. So it's making selling starch a little sexier, and we've always had a hard time attracting people into the industry because they want to do right. Especially now with AI and technology, there's just cool things you can do sitting on your computer. But we do find that people that come work for us, they're either from the industry and they're looking for a change, or we're attracting people now that want to be part of that sustainability story and kind of impact to that. So I got to apologize if you can hear the cat in the background.
That's okay.
We just adopted a new cat 2 days ago, and he's a little bit busy this morning.
Is that your first pet in the house, or do you got other ones?
No, like I've had pets my whole life. I haven't had one for a couple of years. So we were kind of going around and looking at the Humane Society, and didn't really particularly thought we were going to pick up one right away, but this one kind of clicked right with us. And you think now, an hour in the new home, and he was walking around checking everything out, and then he's been here forever. So
I feel like that's the way it goes when you get a new pet, or when you're looking at a pet at a shelter. It's either they're exactly the right animal and you guys vibe immediately, or it's like, I didn't find any, but nothing.
Yeah, it was funny because we were walking up. Here he goes crazy. We were walking up to the building, and he was actually looking out the window at us, and I went, "That's a cool looking cat." Right. And then sure enough, that ends up being the one that we came back and got a couple of days later.
That's the way it works.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So from the corporate, so I started moving up through the ranks through there, and now I run our industrial business for US and Canada. So we've got a team of 42 plus people, that travel around and visit these plants, and we're looking to grow as we get further down this road on sustainability and packaging. But as you said, Amazon and those companies, they're leading the charge. You're even seeing it here. They're moving away from the plastic envelopes that they're packing in, and they're using one that's paper based. So that's kind of interesting. We worked on those. I don't think you guys have them in Europe. The horrible paper straws that are used here.
No,
you guys have them. I mean, they're horrible. I always kind of laugh when I said, I go, it's not the plastic straw that's killing all the sea turtles. It's all the cocaine they're sniffing with that straw, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, straws are useful for many things.
Yeah, exactly. So and I thought, how unfortunate was it for that turtle that he's floating around in this vast ocean, and that one straw just happens to go right up his nose and cause him to choke and die. So, anyways, but what you do see in this stuff is, in the past, it's been called greenwashing. So you get companies that are making statements that sound great, but there's nothing behind it, right? They can't substantiate their claims. So there's been a lot by the industry too to kind of, I guess regulate it and certify, when you're talking about sustainability and recyclability, and it's interesting when you see market surveys to see what do you think is recyclable? What do you think compostable means? And a lot of people don't know. They just think, well, I'm doing something, right? I got a bin that's blue that I put these things into. I got a bin that's green and I put these things into it, and I'm being a great environmental, citizen and doing this. And it is great, but it's unfortunate that a lot of that stuff is just still going to landfill, or it's going to another country where they're burning it, just in open pits, right? Like, it's amazing the the number of tires that are burned, like millions and millions and millions of tires are burned every year in, we'll call third world countries because they don't have regulations for it, and we're paying them to do it, right? And we'll say, oh, we're doing good. We have a tire recycling program. We in here Canada, you go buy tires and you pay like, there's like a $25 environmental fee for your tire. Well, that tire probably is going to get shipped off to, someplace in Africa where they're just going to have like these massive piles of tires that they just burn on a regular basis. So
there's like a good way to do that. Like there's a way where you can do it and it recycles the material, or is there?
You can recycle. I mean, there's only so many, kids playgrounds that you can chew up tires and put them down. But, they're also using, they're also finding ways to use that into building materials and construction materials. You're seeing a lot of recycled material going into the asphalt industry for building roads and things like that. So, but there's still a lot of waste out there, and we got to figure out a way to do it. So I guess that's, my little piece of contributing to the betterment of the environment is helping our customers find easier ways or better ways to use our products, which are plant-based and sustainable in doing that. Another thing that's coming on a lot too is regenerative agriculture. So right now everything's monocrop, right? You'll see a field like they may rotate it, but they're doing corn on that field every year for like 20 years, and the soil's been stripped down, so they have to use fertilizers and pesticides and all these things that are just horrible for it. So now regenerative agriculture is coming into play where they may not have the same level of yield on a per acre per crop, but it's better for the soil, right? It's better for the environment.
Is this the thing where you use corn one year and then like soybeans the following year because they take different
next
things
year,
from the soil?
and then maybe the third year you're putting nothing. You just till up the ground, right? And you let what's left over there from what you haven't harvested just decompose and put the nutrients back into the soil. Because you're not using the same level of chemicals. So, when it rains, that effluent and spill off's not going into the rivers and causing, pollution and toxicity to the water system. So you're going to start seeing a lot more of that happening too. And when you're doing that,
you hear like farm subsidies are required so that maybe farmers can take, I don't want to call it a year off necessarily, but like give some of the land a rotational down year. Like, is that a good reason for farm subsidies in this case?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is. I mean, farming is, farmers are, they're cash poor, but they're asset rich. Like that land's worth a lot of money, but most farmers don't make money till they sell that, right? And a lot of them, they don't want to sell it, right? I mean, if we keep selling off our farmland for, to put up, strip malls and condominiums, at some point, where's the food coming from, right?
Exactly.
But, you can see these things. Well, we're going to 3D print meat. I mean, that's a whole other subject, right? That's
a different topic.
That's a different topic for a different day. But anyway, so that's kind of where it took me down and now being in this. So I've always kind of been in a, through that, I've had people reporting to me. So I've always been in, I don't manage people. I help coach and mentor people. So I've always had that coaching and mentoring side in my professional life, which is kind of translated into jiu-jitsu as well. And there's a lot of lessons, kind of back and forth, dealing with different personalities and the stress levels. But to me, what jiu-jitsu's helped me with a lot in the corporate world is managing that stress, right? Dealing with maybe, pissed off customer, maybe they're pissed off because they're just, they're a highly, emotional person and they overreact to something, or we've completely fucked up. Or you're sitting in the boardroom and, you're being, the CEO and the CFO that are asking, why your numbers aren't working out the way that they're supposed to. And it just kind of gives you that opportunity to kind of breathe and sit through it. And I laugh. And I know other people have said that, I'll be sitting in a boardroom either with a customer at work and I'm like, hey, at least this person's not on my back trying to choke me out.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I've dealt with worse situations like that. So it's allowed me to kind of have that calm, cool, and collective. And then jiu-jitsu's given me that outlet that when I'm having a bad day at the office, I'm going to go hit the mats. And, I think we talked about it before. To me, it's kind of my therapy. And I think everyone has this, like when you're rolling, you're not thinking about anything else. If you're thinking about something else, you're getting destroyed on the mats. So it kind of gives you that ability to have that therapy and that clarity and to walk away with it. And I've had times where, you kind of step away and I go for a roll, and then, when I'm driving home and decompressing, like going, oh shit, I got smashed today or did this, that, something will click to me, right? Going, oh, I know the solution for that problem at work now. And it was kind of weird, when I was in university, I'd be studying for exams, right? And you'd be like, man, I got this problem and I just can't solve it. And you go and you do something else. And I had a number of times I'd wake up at like 2:00 in the morning and going, my God, I see the solution, right? I've got to get up and I've got to write this down. So I have some of those sometimes with after rolling, after training, after putting yourself through that physical and mental exhaustion of doing jiu-jitsu and other, there's other things that I do to kind of push myself physically to do that sometimes it gives you that clarity that you're like, you're like, oh, I see the solution to whatever it could be a problem at work, it could be a problem at home or whatever. So that's kind of how I link the two together. And then just managing people, because I have people of different age ranges, of different backgrounds, different points in their life at work. It's the same at jiu-jitsu. So, it kind of gives me the ability to kind of, I don't want to say play psychologist, but, dealing with emotions and what's going on in people's lives and trying to help them, if it's keep on track for, whatever our goals are at business, or to keep them on track for whatever their goals are in jiu-jitsu. So there's a nice crossover there.
Is there like a special lesson or a particular lesson that jumps out at you where you're like, man, I'm really glad I learned this on the mat because now I can help people, in the business world?
I think the crossover for me is, and I say this and it's very blunt, show up and do your job. Show up and do the job, right? And it's the same thing. I mean, if you're going to show up to work and you're not going to do your job, you're not a useful person on the team, right? And there's going to be problems. And I've been very fortunate that, the 20 years that I've been with this company and doing this job, I've only had to, put a couple of people on, a performance improvement plan and then exit them from the company. But it translates the same thing into jiu-jitsu. You've got to show up and you got to do the work. If you're just going to show up and, you're going to roll around and be a fool and you're not going to have intention into what you're doing, you're never going to progress and you're never going to learn. It's the same thing at work, right? You've got to, we're there, you're getting paid, but I have people that are like, well, I want the next job. I want to do this and I want to do that. And I said, well, sometimes you got to put in a little extra work that you're not going to get paid for. Ask to be put on a project. Ask to be involved in something that's going on so that you expose yourself, get out of your comfort zone. If you're just sitting back, just doing your job, right? Or you're just coming to the gym and you're just like doing the bare minimum of what's going on in class and you're not putting a little extra into it, right? Maybe you're not working on your conditioning or your flexibility, or you're not going down rabbit holes of techniques that you like to kind of develop your game, then that's where you're really going to plateau and you may stay there forever, right? So I've got people that work with me and they've been in the same position for 20 years. I've got other people that have, that I've known through work that over 20 years, they're now on our executive leadership team and running the company. Same thing in jiu-jitsu, right? You've got that guy that's been, the 10-year blue belt, right? And then you've got those other people that, in 8 years, they've gone from white belt to black belt, right? Because they've just put the effort in to go and do it. So that's kind of the lesson learned there, is that, don't take it for granted, take advantage of every situation. If you've got time to put in a little extra work, put it in. And that kind of builds, your, if you want to call it the emotional bank account, that when it's time for things to happen, right? You can ask for it, right? Everyone says, oh, and ask for never ask about your belt or whatever. But, in the corporate world, you can ask for it. Like, I think I deserve a raise, I deserve a promotion, and here's everything that I've done, right? So I always tell guys, your year-end review is kind of like a grading. Like, come to me, make it easy for me. Come to me with a well-written review showing all these things that you've done to contribute it, and then it makes it very easy for me. If I have to turn around and have to write it out and make things up, that's going to piss me off, and that's more work for me, and I can't do that for 40 people.
Yeah.
So make the job easy for me. It's the same thing with jiu-jitsu. Make the job easy for me, right? Come and show up, put in the work, put in the, dedicate to it, train as much as you can. But when you're coming to train, make sure it's intentional.
So that's interesting. I take a slightly different tact with the jujitsu side of it, like, because one of the things I specifically learned that I applied to the leadership side of my job is like sometimes people are just showing up as an escape. And
Yeah.
and like I learning to identify that on the mat was super helpful for me in learning to identify that in, like management or leadership. And I don't mind when somebody shows up for work and they just do their job and they want to go home at 5 o'clock. But I wasn't good at identifying that as easily because I had a similar mindset to you. It was like, show up, do your job.
Yeah.
But then when I started teaching jujitsu,
and that's what I say. So that's why I say, like, show up and do your job. Like there are certain things that you have to do for your job, so you have to do it. But if you want more, if you want promotion, right? If you want to accelerate and promote and make more money and get to a management position or whatever it is, so you got to put in that little extra work. And listen, I'm the same way in jiu-jitsu. Like, I know there's guys that are just showing up. They can only train twice a week. It's their escape and do that. But those aren't the guys that are going like, why did Bob get his purple belt and I didn't? Well, it's because Bob's on the mat 4 or 5 times a week. He's going to competitions. He's always coming and asking questions about stuff. And you're just coming in and you're putting in the reps that I'm asking you to put in, right? You're being a good, you're being a good soldier, right? You're doing your job. It's just like in the military. When you go in the military, not everyone's going to be a general, right?
Right.
But you need people at certain levels that are really good at their job. So I have guys that they've been doing the same job for 20 years and they're awesome at it. But they also have the self-awareness that this is what I'm good at. I don't want to move up, right, in corporate world because I don't want to manage people. I don't want to deal with the bullshit that comes with every level that you go up, right? Yes. So in the work world, you see that. And the same thing, but everyone in jiu-jitsu wants their black belt, right? They all want their black belt. And I just tell them, well, if you're coming here as, and I hate using the term hobbyist because if you're in it long enough to get your black belt, it's not a hobby. Right, it's become it's a lifestyle. Yeah. To me, the hobby is like the white belt. It's the white belt that never gets his blue belt, or it's the blue belt that never gets the purple belt. Right, they're just kind of in and out, and they're doing it when it's convenient for them, which is fine. Right, everyone's journey is different, but but that becomes a difference between the people that are coming out to do it as an escape, as a form of exercise and stress relief. But they tend to be the ones that if it takes me 15 years to get my black belt, I'm okay. But there's always that person that doesn't put in the same level of effort as everyone else, but they think, well, I've been a blue belt for 2 years. Why don't I have my purple belt? Yeah. I've been a purple belt for 2 years. Why don't I have my brown belt? Right. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you got to show up, you got to do your job. Right. But then you need to make that decision of, for your career, for your advancement, what level of effort and energy you're going to put in it to maybe accelerate that. Right. And give your boss, right, your instructors, your boss on the mats per se, give them the reason to believe that you're ready for that next level. And I always tell guys, I go, listen, it doesn't matter how long it takes to get to be a black belt. Once you're there, you're there. Like, you hear stories like, Gordon Ryan got it in 4 years. Well, yeah. And, Gordon Ryan was a gym rat and he spent 60, 70 hours a week training. I fully expected he's going to get there quicker because he was willing to sacrifice all these things in his life to get there, where other people are like, takes 12 years, on average, it takes 12 years, 13 years, 14 years, but they still get there, right? They still get to that knowledge level. So like I say, it's a journey. And that's why I say I hate using the term hobby, because at that point, when you're dedicating that much to your life, it's just like going to work. Going to work's not a hobby, right? You're going there, you're getting paid. Like, some people are miserable about it. Yeah. But it's the same thing. Like, when you're trying to find, people that retire, or, they're looking for, some purpose, and they go and they volunteer. It's the same thing. I have friends that volunteer and they're not getting paid for it, but they still put the same ethics that they have at work to strive for excellence, to make that the best opportunity that it is. And then you'll see some people that they move from being, I'll use the Humane Society. They move from being the person that's cleaning out the cat box to, maybe they're the local director of the Humane Society at the end of it, right? So
there's something really nice about that, like finding that purpose, and whether it's on the mat, in work or whatever, volunteering. I think there's like wonderful when people find that for themselves.
Yeah, and I have and I've had a few people over the last few years, because my sales team tends to be a little bit older. guys, they're retiring, and I always ask them like, what are your plans? And they're like, well, I'm going to travel and I'm going to spend time, with my grandkids. And I'm like, okay, well, traveling after a while, loses its luster. And your grandkids when they're young, I go, they're fun to be around with, but at some point they're going to become teenagers, they're going to become grown adults. That's not going to be there. So I said, you need to find a purpose, you need to find a passion, right? You need a reason, and maybe your passion is like, I'm just going to wake up every morning, have a coffee, read, take the dog for a walk, and then I'm going to have a nap. And then
if
and that's
you can
it.
be passionate about that, that's a good.
And if you can be passionate about that, that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
And other people, you've talked to other people on this podcast, like Brian Rumble, Dungeons and Dragons, role playing games are his passion, right? If Brian's not working and Brian's not doing jiu-jitsu, he's into science fiction, he's into all those things. And I just talk about Brian because I know him well. He's into that thing. For me, if I'm not at work, I'm at jiu-jitsu. And maybe this kind of goes into another subject. And if I'm not doing jiu-jitsu, I try to find other physical and mental challenges to kind of keep me busy.
I actually want to talk about that, the other one.
Yeah.
Like you said you have a guilty pleasure of Batman, and you've read some interesting stuff. Like, how did you get into that as a guilty pleasure? Like, what was your origin story?
Well, so my origin story. So, as a kid, everyone likes superheroes, right? And I had friends, you're a kid, you're running around and you're playing around and, you're role playing and, who's doing this and that. And I had friends like, oh, I want to, I'm Superman. I love Superman. And I kept looking at like all the superheroes and I'm going, well, Superman's too easy. I mean, he's got all the power. Like I'm going, if I was Superman, man, I'd be like, I want that Lamborghini. I'm going to take it because who's going to stop me? Like it's like too much, right? It's like too much. It's like being IBJJ. It's like being an IBJJF world champion black belt. And you go in a room full of white belts, right? You're just going to have your day with those people.
Hold on. One of the thing you just said, I forget who said it. There was like some quote that was like, the only difference between a villain origin story and a superhero origin story is like they both start with pain, but the superhero says that I got hurt and I don't want anyone else to get hurt. And the villain says, well, I got hurt and now I want everyone else to feel this pain. And it sounds like your description of I want that Lamborghini is like I'm just going to take this because I can have it.
Because I can have it because no one can stop me, right? Yeah. So I was always like, so I was reading the comic books. I'm going, well, why doesn't Superhero just use his laser vision to do it? So I was like going, his life's so, like it's almost too easy, right? It's almost too easy. But I gravitated towards Batman because I'm like, Batman's like just a regular person. I mean, he's a billionaire, right? And I always thought there's the meme. It's like, there's 500 billionaires in the world, and why isn't one of them figured out to be Batman? And I think Elon Musk is probably the closest to figuring out how to be Batman.
I don't know. Maybe it could be Zuckerberg because at least he's
Zuckerberg's learning to fight, right?
Yeah,
he's learning to fight. So, and I always thought like, oh, Batman's cool because he's got gadgets, right? And he's got some body armor, but he puts his body through physical trauma. Like he always gets beat up, right? He's always getting shot. He's getting stabbed. He's getting beat up and he's broken, but he just has this sheer will to do what he thinks is right. And that's kind of the cool part about the ethics of Batman. He's doing what he thinks is right. But sometimes he's acting like a criminal, but in his mind, he's justified in doing it. So I thought that's kind of cool. Like he's got cool gadgets. Like Iron Man's got cool gadgets, but Iron Man's got this suit of armor. He can fly into outer space. He can fly underwater. He can do all this stuff. So, but like Batman's relying on his brain, right? Like he's got to plan out everything. He's got to be smart about what he does. And, just the physical trauma he puts himself through. But every day, he sounds like jiu-jitsu, right? You put yourself through this physical trauma, but every day you go back out, right? Every night he's putting that suit back on. He's going out to fight the evil of Gotham. And, every night we put our spats on, or we put on our pajamas and we go out to battle on the mat. So it kind of gravitated to me as a kid, which sounded kind of weird because I had friends, well, Batman's so weak, like Superman can kill him. I said, but Batman's pretty cunning, man. He came up with a way to find, he hunted down green kryptonite and has kryptonite weapons, and he's got that. Like he's got that in the back of his mind that if I got to take you out, I got a way to take you out. So that's kind of where it got on into me. And, the comics were great. And then I just remember being a kid and, the 1960s Batman, it was so corny and so cheesy, but it was kind of cool. So when people ask me like,
that's the old Adam West stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm going Adam West. I mean, because you look at Adam West, there was no muscle suit there. That was Adam West, right? Like that was all him. And you look at Cesar Romero being the Joker. You can see his mustache underneath the makeup. It's like they didn't give a fuck, right? They're out there and they're having fun. So that kind of drew me into it. I'm not like a super fanatic that I know every single detail of every Batman storyline, but it became a guilty pleasure. So it's funny. A couple of years ago, I got away. I said I'm going to get away from reading fiction. And I'm just going to read nonfiction to, if there's something going on in the world, I want to understand it, right? I think we talked about this last time with what was going on with Israel and Palestine. I read this, there's volumes of books about the history of Israel and in the Middle East and everything that's going on there. I read stuff about, ethics and, if I hear a funny conspiracy theory, if it's about UFOs or, aliens, living, I just like to read all kinds of stuff and kind of have an idea, but it's like, oh, I gotta, after talking to you about stuff like that, I gotta get back into reading because there's some Batman storylines that I really didn't, or I haven't read in a long time, or I want to get back into reading. So now I'm splitting my reading up between, I have to start with my nonfiction, right? To give my brain that kind of mental, that mental stimulation of learning every day. And now I've got back into like, oh yeah, Batman's going to beat the shit out of that guy. Like, oh, how's he going to solve this one? And playing with it. So it's just kind of fun that way. It's a nice little escape. The movies have been great too, but it just, to me, it kind of caught on like, oh, here's this guy that could just sit back and have a super easy life. Or if you think about it, with the amount of money that he had, he probably could have done more for the citizens of Gotham, through philanthropy, with his money. But he decided that, I've got to put on this cape and cowl. I have to put myself, because his pain, right? His parents were shot in front of him. So he's like, I can never let this happen again. I've got to put myself through this pain and suffering, kind of to cleanse himself of whatever guilt he had there. So it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like he's dark, like he's a superhero, but he's almost kind of like an anti-hero, right? Because he is breaking the law.
Are there any particular ethics that you've been reading about that you find interesting? Like anything where it kind of straddles the line?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So I've just finished reading this book. It's called Batman and Ethics, and they talk about like Batman has this utilitarian thing, like I need to protect life, but I can't take life, but I need to protect it. But he'll go right to the line of beating a person to the inch of their life in order to do that, right? And it's kind of interesting dichotomy that with Batman is, he has these villains like the Joker, right? Probably the most prolific killer in Batman in legend, right? But he won't kill him, right? Think about it. If he just kills the Joker, then how many lives, how many hundreds of thousands of lives are he saving? But he has that line that he won't cross. And his enemies know that, and they play against that weakness against him, and they cause all this mayhem and destruction and death, where if he would just say, fuck it, I'm going to break this guy's neck. I'm going to take him out. No, he's like, I have trust in the justice system. I have trust in the mental care system with Arkham Asylum. I'm going to put this guy, but they always break out, right? So that's kind of the fun part about it, or kind of the dark side about it, or the weird part about it is what he's trying to do to protect, right? He's not willing to sacrifice the few for the benefit of the many, right? If it means causing death. Now, of course, there have been a few times that, he has killed people in the comic books, but it's very few and far between, and it has been on purpose. But if you think about it, if he really wanted to solve problems and solve these crimes and protect the city that he loves, he would just, the Joker, the Penguin, Two-Face, all these people is just, okay, as soon as I get an opportunity to kill you, I'm going to do it. And what's interesting, if you look at, all the sidekicks that he has, the different variations of Robin, and some of the other people they work with, they all have that thing like, I'm just going to go and kill this guy. And then he convinces them, no, killing's not the right thing to do. And so it's just kind of interesting.
Do you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, I don't think taking a life is the best thing, but you got to think.
Not that I'm asking you to advocate killing. I just meant like in terms of the Batman thing. Do you think that?
But if you thought about it, I mean, you kind of think about it in our real world. If there's someone out there that's committing violent crimes and causing mass death and confusion, we usually, we're labeling those person as a terrorist, right? So that we have this ethical cleansing of our mind. Go, well, that's a terrorist, so we have to kill them, right?
Yeah.
So then we'll go out and we'll kill them. Sometimes it stops it. Sometimes it just propagates and it just breeds more terrorism and more violence there. So, if you look back and go, well, the Joker, he's insane, right? He's not going to stop. He's even said that, like, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to break out. I'm going to kill more people. I'm going to poison the water system. I'm going to do all these things. You might think it might be easier just to, put a bullet between his eyes and take care of it, and then you can move on to the next one. But in life, there's always going to be something out there. So to me, that's kind of the fun part, right? He's dealing with these people that, as you say, the difference between the hero and the villain is the hero doesn't want to cause any more pain and the villain does. These are people that want to cause pain. And they know his warped ethics that he will not kill. So they just continue to take advantage of that weekness. Has
kind of love of Batman kind of changed with a result, like as there's like, the different Batmans like George Clooney and then, Christian Bale, and then now it's Robert Pattinson, and there was a couple of others in there at some.
Yeah, it's I remember when the 1989 Batman came out. I think that weekend that it opened, I think I watched it 6 times. I love that movie. I thought it was great. Like I thought Michael Keaton was great. I love Tim Burton. I think his world and depiction was kind of cool, and I really liked that movie. And and his were kind of. They were playing along the fun line of what the Adam West Batman was, kind of campy and kind of silly, but yet still had that darkness to it. Yeah. Right? People were dying, things were happening, so it was fun. I mean, I think some of the bad guys they put in there after a while got a little over the top. Jim Carrey's the Joker was just not as a Joker as the Riddler was kind of like over the top, but they were fun. The Christian Bale. The Christopher Nolan trilogy, that kind of got into that dark side of Batman. I'm going, oh yeah, that's a truer sense of Batman. And then I'm pretty excited to see, like, when they first said Robert Pattinson's gonna be Batman, I'm like, oh my god, what are they doing? Like, but then I watched that movie and I was like, this is brilliant. They've taken a superhero, but they've turned it into like a detective crime movie, right? Like, he didn't have to be Batman in that. He could have been, some detective, doing his normal thing. So I like what they did that, and I like what they're doing with that universe. The Penguin TV show that was on.
I haven't seen it.
It's like, even if you like, Batman's not even in it, right? They really don't even talk much about Batman in that at all. It's just the evolution of Penguin.
Yep. And Colin Farrell's an excellent.
Yeah, Colin Farrell's awesome. So I'm really excited to see where they're going with this, because they're doing kind of the dark side of it, like Christian Bale, but he's truly being that detective. He's early in his career. He's not as beat up, but he's still physically getting beat up. He's trying to figure out, his way in the world. So I'm interested to see who they're going to bring in as kind of the next villain, and how that relationship between him and the Penguin grows. And I think they've signed on for like 4 more movies or something like that. So I think they're going to really expand this out. I was a little disappointed. I was kind of hoping that they were going to merge Joaquin Phoenix Joker with this Robert Pattinson Batman, because Joaquin Phoenix was just, that movie was great. It was a great depiction. It's, there's a couple different storylines of how Joker became Joker, and they took the failed comedian route, and I thought they did a great job. And I actually watched the second movie after hearing that it was horrible, and I liked it. It wasn't bad. One. Yeah, and I like when people, they turn it into a musical. I said, yeah, but I go, like, in the first movie, he had all these, imaginary scenarios that, in the game, the TV host, talk show host was like his dad, right? Like, he thought like he was a great comedian. They use the musicals as part of, like, that's his insanity. Like, that's where, instead of going to the mat to roll jiu-jitsu, he goes off in this world of like Fred Astaire and all this stuff, where he's like this great, singer and performer. So that it's really down his route of insanity. So it's kind of brilliant.
I really liked the Heath Ledger Joker, honestly. Like, in the dark, like that to me, there aren't a whole lot of movies where I watched the movie and I was like, oh, that character changes my view of reality. And Heath Ledger's Joker literally changed my view of how people can exist and how evil people can like exist in life. It was incredibly well done.
And that's what I liked about Heath Ledger's performance, and it's also what I liked about Joaquin Phoenix's, is that you could see that they were normal people, right? Like, in the comic books, Joker's the Red Hood, Batman's fighting him, he falls into a vat of chemicals and he becomes that, right? These ones are like, no, these were real people that had a very traumatic experience in their life that broke them, right? Just like Batman. Batman had a traumatic experience in his life that broke him. As you say, one decided to protect life and the other one decided to say, screw it. I want these things, and if it means that I have to kill people, I'm going to get it, right? And kind of burn the system down. So I agree with you. I thought Heath Ledger's portrayal of Joker was amazing, and I think Joaquin Phoenix kind of went down the same route. Not as diabolical, but still that psychotic break. Willing to kill to elevate their status in society or whatever. So yeah, it was really good. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen there. And like I said, I just started again, breaking open some of the storylines and rereading some stuff and going down, some of the storylines I didn't pay too much attention to, 10 years ago.
If somebody wants to get into that, who's just seen the movies and is like, oh, wow, I hadn't even considered that there's like books, like, theses written on this. Do you have any like recommended reading?
I mean, what Batman started in 1939 or 1940. I mean, there's decades. I think the golden age of Batman was kind of, the 90s into the early 2000s. So there's a lot of really cool storylines, kind of three that kind of pan together, and I'm rereading them now. One is it's called Contagion. So it's a collection of Batman comics that talk about like this plague that comes and basically wipes out the population of Gotham City. After that, there's one. It's Cataclysm. So once Gotham's got over this and Batman's done his thing to help contain and help fight this plague, there's a massive earthquake that basically destroys Gotham City. So he's got to go through that, and then the next kind of compilation after that is called No Man's Land, and it's almost kind of like in the third Batman movie where Gotham City's completely cut off and the criminals are running rampant and all that stuff. So it's kind of neat. There's a lot of different characters in that, but I mean, you kind of just pick up a book and go. I mean, you can I got into the DC kind of revamped Batman, and they did the New 52. So the New 52 starts right from year one of Batman, where he's once again kind of like the Robert Pattinson. He's only a year or two into being Batman and his journey, and it goes all the way through evolutions of dealing with Joker, the Court of Owls, all these things that are going on. So if you like what's happened in the movies, if you've watched the Christian Bale stuff, maybe picking up on the New 52 might be a good start point.
Cool. Matt, this was a super fun conversation. I'm really glad that we took the time to do a round two. I really enjoyed learning about sustainability and the packaging. Is there anything that you think would be useful for people? Like, I'll include the books and stuff in the show notes, but is there anything that you think people should read about, whether in the Batman or the sustainability thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a sustainability standpoint, we can all do a little bit to help out. And I know everyone's, depending on where your political views are, people have a different view of what's happening with the environment. I mean, it's definitely changing. And we consume a lot. So, figure out when you're like anything, it's like food, right? You look at the food, if you eat a bag of Doritos or you eat a bag of carrots, they're going to have two different things that are going to happen to you, right? So I think, just being conscious of the environment, what's out there. There's a lot of people that preach on one side or the other. And my thing is just information is the power. And I don't feel that people read enough, like they're headline readers or they're low information voters. Like they hear the tagline and it's like, oh, that's what I believe in, or they think they believe in. But do your research, right? Do your research. If it's on politics, if it's on environment, if it's on jiujitsu, if it's on whatever, go and read and educate yourself. And what I've tried to do and challenge myself in my readings is I go and find that opposing view. Go read somebody that opposes your view, right? So to me, it's just read, educate yourself, understand where your viewpoints are coming from, understand where other people's viewpoints are coming from. It's helped me in business as well. I've had tough negotiations where, I'm trying to get a price increase. They're trying to get a price decrease, right? And you got to figure out, well, how do I justify my standpoint? I have to understand their standpoint, and somewhere we'll kind of meet in the middle and do business. And same thing, sometimes in business, you got to play the game. You got to put a bit of a face on, but people can tell when you're disingenuous, right? And you're just trying to be that slick car salesman. And it's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. People will tell that, you're disingenuous. And I've talked to a few friends that have opened gyms, and, what should, they ask me questions, what should I do? You travel around a lot, so you see what works. I said, just be yourself. People that are like-minded that will gravitate to you, right? And you'll build a culture that works for you and that works for them. If you try to force feed it or try to be something that you're not, you're going to end up failing. Right? And anything in life, right? If you're pretending and you're not willing to, you may say I need to change, but if you're not willing to do the work to be genuine about making that change, you're just going to end up failing, and then you're going to have a bad reputation. And at the end of the day, in jiu-jitsu, in business, in life, it's your reputation, right? That's what people remember.
I think that's a great thing. Just be authentically you. I think that's a wonderful way to live life.
Yep, exactly. Cool.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate your time today. This was a great round 2.
Yeah, well, you know what? If you ever want to do round 3, 4, and 5, I'm here. There's lots of other stuff we can talk to that we didn't get to today.
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about changing gyms, starch, packaging sustainability, or the ethics of Batman, feel free to reach out to Matt. If you find yourself near Ontario, Canada, reach out to Matt directly for a role. You can find his information in the show notes. And as always, thank you for your time and attention.